All right, wonderful. Thank you all for being here today. I am very excited to have one of our very own alum coming to present today, Dr. Nina Ayers. My name is Emily Sprenger. I'm an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning, and we are happy to have you all join us today for today's webinar, Qualitative Descriptive Phenomenology Methodology. And a couple of brief things. Please do have conversation in the chat. We welcome that. If you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A. That way I won't lose them in the chat and we can get to those as time permits. And a couple of other things. The scrolling subtitle is actually going on the bottom as well too of your Zoom. If you do want to see that, go ahead and hover over the bottom and the CC option and hit show subtitle. As always, we are recording our webinar and we will post this in the CTL Webinars LibGuide page for future reference. So without further ado, I am going to pass this over to Dr. Ayers.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Nina Ayers. You can call me Nina. Just to give you a little bit about myself, I do have my PhD in psychology from North Central University. I have a master's in healthcare administration from Capella and a bachelor's degree in biology. And I'm so excited that you decided to join me today. So without further ado, let's start this webinar on qualitative descriptive phenomenology methodology. All right, so what is qualitative research? So I always like to start here because a lot of times when we start our doctoral journey, it was my experience that is assumed we understand which methodology we want to take, quantitative, qualitative, but first we need to understand really what qualitative journey is. So qualitative research relies on data obtained by the researcher from firsthand observations. So this can include interviews, questionnaires, focus groups, participant observations, recordings made in a natural setting, documents and artifacts. The data is generally non-numerical. So qualitative research versus quantitative research. So qualitative research involves collecting and evaluating non-numerical data in order to understand concepts or subjective opinions. So examples of qualitative research include document review, open-ended questionnaires, interviews, participant observations, field notes, and reflections. So this data can be observed and not measured. Quantitative research. This involves collecting and evaluating numerical data. So examples of quantitative research include closed-ended questionnaires, for example, IQ tests, survey measurements. So quantitative data, this data can be measured. The big question, when to apply qualitative or quantitative research? So when to apply quantitative or qualitative research. So qualitative research is used to answer questions about experience, meaning, and perspective. So qualitative research is most often used from a standpoint of the participant. So this type of data is not usually amendable to counting or measuring. Qualitative research techniques include small group discussions that are for investigating beliefs, attitudes, and concepts of normative behavior. Semi-structured interviews are to seek views on a focused topic or key informants for like background information or an institutional perspective. In-depth interviews are to understand a condition, experience, or event from a personal perspective, and an analysis of texts and documents such as a government report, media articles, websites, or diaries to learn more about a distributed or private knowledge. While quantitative research is used to collect and analyze numerical data to describe, predict, or control variables of interest. So typically the goals of quantitative research are to test causal relationships between variables, make predictions, and generalize results to wider populations. Some of my favorite qualitative research designs. So there's the phenomenological studies. So phenomenology aims to explain experiences. The researcher may be studying several individuals who have shared the same experience. Uh, Ethnography describes and interprets the shared patterns of cultural groups. Grounded theory develops models and describes processes. This may involve studying a process, action, or interaction. Historical studies involve the identification, location, evaluation, and synthesis of data from the past. Case studies are for developing an in-depth description of a case or multiple cases. So in this scenario, the researcher may focus on a specific event. Action research studies is a type of qualitative research that seeks action to improve a practice and then studies the effects of the action that was taken. So an action research study typically has many participants. Biography. In this study, it's typically of individuals' experiences as told to the researcher or found in a document or archival material. Now let's dive a little bit more into phenomenological studies. So phenomenological studies examine human experiences through the descriptions provided by people involved. These experiences are called lived experiences. So this study design, the phenomenological study design, is one of the most commonly used methodologies in qualitative research within social and health sciences. The goal of phenomenological studies is to describe the meaning that experiences hold for each subject. This type of research is used to study areas which there is little knowledge. So in phenomenological research, respondents are asked to describe their experiences as they perceive them. They may write about their experiences, but information is generally obtained through interviews. So to understand the lived experience from the vantage point of a subject, the researcher must take into account their own beliefs and feelings. The researcher must first identify what they expect to discover and then deliberately put aside these ideas. Now, this process is called bracketing. Only when the researcher puts aside their own ideas about the phenomena is it possible to see the experience from the eyes of the person who has lived the experience firsthand. So bracketing is a very important concept. So when to use interpretive or descriptive phenomenology? First, let's talk about really what it is. So descriptive phenomenology is used when a researcher wants to describe the phenomena under study and then brackets their biases. The interpretative phenomenology is used when the research question asks for the meaning of the phenomena and the researcher does not bracket their bias and prior engagement with this question under study.
Dr. Ayers,
Yes,
would we be able to take a brief pause here and go back to get the reference for bracketing theories?
sure.
Someone asked if we could get a reference for bracketing, and if you are going to potentially explain bracketing a little bit further in detail, or if we should wait a little bit longer in the presentation.
I will explain bracketing a little bit more, how to perform bracketing. Now, what was the other question? The reference for the
Yeah,
theories?
yeah, it looks like there was, can we get a reference for the theories of bracketing?
Yes, so that is in my reference list. Would you like me to pull it forward
Oh,
and
no,
drop it
no,
in the
we'll
chat?
do that at
Okay,
the end. We'll do that at the end. Thank you so much, Dr. Ayers.
you're
Are you
welcome.
able to expand a little bit more on the bracketing piece?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that's a great question because I believe I go right into the importance of bracketing into the next slide.
Okay, so we'll wait. We'll wait. That's okay. All right, sounds good.
So an important concept here is the biggest difference between descriptive and interpretive phenomenology is that descriptive phenomenology, we make sure the researcher brackets their bias before moving forward with the research. Now, we talked just a little bit about bracketing here, but let's go into the next slide. Okay. So descriptive phenomenology. So here, the researchers insist on careful descriptions of ordinary conscious experience of everyday life, a description of things as people experience them. These things include hearing, seeing, believing, remembering, deciding, evaluating, and acting. So a little bit more about descriptive phenomenology. This method was developed by Dr. Amadio Giorgi, who based his methodology on the principles developed by Edmund Husserl. So descriptive phenomenology is used to describe how human beings experience a certain phenomenon. The researcher may ask, what is this experience like? What does this experience mean? Or how does this lived experience present itself to the participant? So in descriptive phenomenology, some of the common methods that are used, it's participant observation, in-depth interviews with open-ended questions, conversations and focus workshops. Researchers may also use a written record of experiences such as diaries, journals, art, poetry, and music. So descriptive phenomenology methods usually, but not always, involves a small sample of participants. So that's approximately 10 to 15 participants. Analysis includes an attempt to identify themes, if possible, make generalizations in relation to how a particular phenomena is perceived or experienced. Oops, sorry about that, clicked a little fast. So Colaizzi's 7-step descriptive phenomenological analysis. Colaizzi's method of qualitative data analysis is rigorous and robust, and therefore it strives to ensure the credibility and reliability of its results. So it allows researchers to reveal emergent themes and their interwoven relationships. Now, researchers use a descriptive phenomenological approach should consider using this data analysis method. As a clear and logical process through the fundamental structure of an experience can be explored. So it is a 7-step process. So step 1, familiarization. Colaizzi's step 1 is familiarization. So the researcher familiarizes themselves with the data, and this is by reading through all the participant accounts several times. So this means extensive reading and rereading all of the participants' verbatim transcripts. Okay. Colaizzi's step 2 is identifying significant statements. So the researcher identifies all statements in the accounts that are direct relevance to the phenomena under investigation. So here the researcher will be extracting significant statements or phrases from the participants' transcripts that pertain directly to the phenomena. Colaizzi's step 3 is formulating meanings. So the researcher identifies meanings relevant to the phenomenon that arise from careful consideration of the significant statements. So let's talk a little bit more about bracketing. So the researcher must bracket their biases to stick closely to the phenomena as experienced by the participant. Though Colaizzi recognized that complete bracketing is never possible, the concept of bracketing should be in the researcher's mind through the research process. And these strategies are not merely restricted to the data collection and analysis phases. Instead, they should be started before doing any literature review because the research process of the literature review, data collection, and analysis are sequentially related. So reflexivity is the key thinking activity that helps us to identify the potential influence throughout the research process. Reflexivity involves the realization of an honest examination of the values and interests of the researcher that may impinge upon research. So hopefully that answers, that elaborates a little bit more about the bracketing process. In step 4, Colaizzi's step 4, clustering themes. So the researcher clusters the identified meanings into themes that are common across all accounts. Again, bracketing is crucial, especially to avoid any potential influence of existing theory, opinions, biases that may impact your research journey. So bracketing is helpful. It helps qualitative researchers to identify areas of potential bias and helps them minimize their influences by bracketing them. So using a reflexive journal may be helpful to develop bracketing skills and facilitate decision making during the progress of a phenomenological investigation. So to bring reflexivity into consciousness, a reflexive journal is used to write down thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and it allows us as researchers to re-examine our positions when issues are raised that might affect the research process.
Would it be okay if we take a brief pause, Dr. Ayers, to answer some questions?
Yes.
Awesome, cool. Let me see here. Someone said yes, thank you so much for the bracketing information. Then another question here, Dr. Ayers, do you recommend the use of software to identify themes with qualitative, such as interviews from the participants?
So I will share with you my personal experience on my dissertation journey. I read and reread my participant transcripts, and then I manually went through and identified themes.
Okay.
Now, that was highly recommended to me. This method was recommended to me by my chair, and I sought out the Academic Success Center, and they helped me through those processes. Now, so I particularly don't have any software that I would recommend, but I would suggest you to, work closely with your chair and, work closely with Academic Success Center, the Center for Learning, and see what resources they have and see kind of what aligns with your dissertation journey.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Ayers. Another question, it says in the chat, to influence, and I'm not sure if this is enough, so let me know if you need this person to expand, to influence existing theory or influence results. And I'm not sure if that goes to this clustering theme piece.
That's a great question. So bracketing is so the researcher,
Clustering.
yes. So when we're talking about bracketing, so the concept behind bracketing is so the researcher is aware of their ideas, opinions, their theories, just the way that the researcher believes this research will go. Their personal biases, it's all written down. So it's a way of holding yourself accountable and addressing how you feel so you do not guide the research. So to answer that question, that is enough information. So without bracketing, you have that possibility to guide even in the literature. It has been my experience, even in the literature review process, you may only pull forward certain theories because maybe your personal bias or your experience with this topic has guided your literature review in that direction. So it is possible. That's why I'm so big on bracketing. So bracketing is a very important concept before you pull out these themes, significant statements, just being aware. So did that answer the question?
I
feel like
think
that.
so. I think
Okay.
it did. I think it did. I think it touched on it. And I think if we need to dive a little bit deeper into it, we can. Oh yes. Yes, this is very helpful. I understand now. Understand not to exclude certain works. Very good. And then this is one more piece on bracketing, and then we'll just try to regroup and get back to your content for your presentation. We can always try to get back to these questions in a little bit.
Okay.
But this one's about the bracketing piece, and I think you just touched on it a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we are a little bit more clear on that. So per bracketing, would the researcher's personal views on the matter be considered as being biased based on his or her experiences with the problem?
That's definitely something that would go into your reflexive journal. That is
Ah,
something you want to bracket. So yes.
okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, I know it seems like a little bit of the same question asked different ways, but I think that's all a part of the learning process as well too.
It really is. And I, when I was in the students same
Yeah.
situation when I was working on my dissertation journey, I had to spend a lot of time here with bracketing because you just really have to spend a lot of time bracketing and writing down kind of how you feel, your opinions, your theories down so they don't influence and guide your research. Because the
Mm,
idea behind qualitative research, no matter what method you take, the goal is to understand that individual's experience. Then you don't want your bias in the way.
thank you so much, Dr. Ayers. And we will pause there. I know there's been a few more questions that are trickling in. Keep in mind as the chat does continue to scroll, attendees, make sure if you want me to get to your question, please put that in the Q&A so I don't lose it in the chat.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, so clustering themes. Okay, so Colaizzi's step 5 is developing an exhaustive description. So the researcher writes a full and inclusive description of the phenomena. So incorporating all the themes produced at step 4. So this is an incorporation of the results into a rich and exhaustive description of the lived experiences. Colaizzi's step 6. Producing the fundamental structure. So the researcher condenses the exhaustive description down to a short, dense statement that captures just those aspects deemed to be essential to the structure of the phenomenon. So validation of the exhaustive description from the participants involved in the research occurs in this step. And Colaizzi's step 7. So a seeking verification of the fundamental structure. So the researcher returns the fundamental structure statement to all the participants, or sometimes a subsample in a larger study, to ask whether it captures their experience. They may go back and modify earlier steps in the analysis in light of this feedback. So this is where the incorporation of any new or pertinent data obtained from the participants, validation, and adaptation to attain congruence with the lived experience of the participant studied happens in this step. And that is a simple 7-step to qualitative descriptive phenomenology. And here I have compiled a great list of references that link directly to this methodology and how to bracket.
Okay, great. Do you have, right now I'm on step 7 for the slide.
Okay.
Take your time as you get to that resource. We should probably pause right here for a moment. I know some people had questions about accessing this webinar. Just so everyone knows, we always post all of our webinars in the Center for Teaching and Learning resource area, which is in your NC1 portal. And we have a YouTube channel. And if you subscribe, you can get access to any webinar that we do ever. So
Awesome.
food for thought. We did have a couple of questions about that in the chat. There are a few other questions that I want to go over, but I just wanted to pause here briefly on this reference slide because I know there were some questions to that. And was there one more slide, Dr. Ayers, that you wanted to share?
Just thank you.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, first of all, someone said, thank you so much for introducing me to Colaizzi's theory.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Let's see if we can get to some questions here during this time for question answers. So Keep in mind that if you have something specific about your own research, Dr. Ayers may not be able to answer that question because she probably doesn't have the entire depth of knowledge that she would need to know for specific questions about research. But we'd like to try to get to a couple of them. Let's see. Let me just scroll up here in the chat. Okay, so is there a difference between positionality statement versus a reflexive, I'm so sorry, a reflexivity statement, I believe? It's okay if we don't have the answer, but do you know?
Yes, so there is a difference. And, you know, what's the best way to word this? Because I spent a lot of time here as well. So there is a difference, and the biggest difference is when you bracket, you're focusing on reflexivity and you're acknowledging, okay, this is my position, this is what I think. And that's totally fine to talk about what you think and what you thought you would find, and acknowledge that, but don't let that drive your actual dissertation, your research, your literature review, because that is the difference. As long as you have that heightened awareness as a researcher, okay, this is my statement, this is what I think, and your research can take you who knows where. And for many of us that have already started writing maybe even a page, we know that research can take us wherever. So you can have your position statement, and as long as you're bracketing, that won't impact the way your research should go.
Great. Next question. Can you please reiterate the distinction? And I think this was the very beginning of your presentation. Can you please reiterate the distinction between phenomenology and grounded theory?
Oh, yes, of course. So phenomenology. So let me start from the beginning. It has been
That's
my
totally fine.
experience that on my doctoral journey, there's I thought the biggest decision I would have to make was qualitative or quantitative methodology. And after that, everything would fall into place. And there's just so many like sub sections that different directions you can go in. Okay. And so now that you've probably already, if you're here, you might have already decided, okay, qualitative is a good fit for you. Now, when it gets down to research designs, you're really focusing on what question are you trying to answer? Okay. And so when we focus on phenomenology, so phenomenology aims to explain experiences. So lived experiences, you might be having a focus group, not a focus group, but semi-structured interviews with individuals to learn more about their experience, how they perceive their experience. And then when you get to, oh, I'm sorry, I changed my screen a
Oh,
bit.
you're fine. We
I
can
did not
still
mean
see
to
the
do that.
thank you. Oh, we can still see the thank you. No worries.
Okay, perfect. So when you get to grounded theory, you're looking to develop models and describe a process. So it's really about what question are you trying to answer? What is the goal of your dissertation?
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ayers. And I do see a few other questions. This is just a comment in the chat I thought I would share with the group in case we have some people that haven't quite gotten to this part of the research, but Timothy just shared that he uses Navivo for all of the qualitative research studies that he does.
Awesome.
It's good to share these resources during these webinars as well too. Okay, so let me see. This may be a question for you, Dr. Ayers, that you could give a suggestion on, but I still think probably going to your chair is the best place to go, but I'm just going to share it anyway in case we have questions that are alike. So in the Q&A, it says, hello, my intention is to complete my research on new administrators and whether their principal preparation programs trained them well. There's some information, but I feel like it's mostly quantitative. Do you think a phenomenological study would work in this case? And I'm going to leave it to Dr. Ayers to kind of answer some of this question, but I do think, well, I have a hunch, but I'm going to let you take it away.
Now that does sound like an amazing story, and not amazing story, but amazing dissertation topic. Now, some of the key things that will come up when you're working closely with your chair is just that. Is there a lot of quantitative research? Is there any qualitative research? Is there a gap? And that's something that you have to work closely with your chair with. And then they'll guide you to the Center for Teaching and Learning or Academic Success Center to help you build out your literature review. And from there, you'll be able to see, okay, what research method would work best for you? Because your literature review will help you drive that and set a foundation for chapter 3.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayers. And I think, oh, excuse me, I pressed the wrong button there. I think something that's important. I know, Dr. Ayers, when you were doing your dissertation, when you were on your journey, so to speak, I'm sure you tried to rely on the resources that are available to you as a student. Can I ask you this question?
Sure.
Did you always know you were going to do qualitative, or what led you to it?
That is a great question. So no, when I started out my doctoral journey, I knew that I wanted to research on caregivers. And I really believed it would have been quantitative. And I thought to myself, well, I have it all figured out. Now I just need to fill in the templates. Now, when I dove into my literature review, so in chapter 2, I spent a lot of time there looking at the gaps in the literature. And so my gaps in the literature were within 3 years, 5 years max, but within 3 years. And then that's when I noticed that there were a lot of quantitative resources and not a lot of qualitative resources. And that I took those results to my chair, and you know what? They helped me they helped me formulate a research method. They said, okay, well, it's definitely not quantitative. Like, you really need to get in the field. You really need to learn about, people's experiences. And the only way you can do that, you can't measure that. You can't just send out a quick survey. And so, and then when I figured out, like, okay, it's going to be qualitative, I was just like, this is going to be easy. I'm going to be doing a case study. Not at all. So, not at all. So, I work closely with my chair to really develop my research questions and find that gap. So, it changed
Thank
a
you.
lot. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's good for students to hear that too.
I see a lot of questions about software.
Yeah, I've seen some software questions in the chat too.
Now, what I can say is, though, even though I do have a qualitative dissertation, I initially started off thinking I would go quantitative. And so I was fully prepared to deal with almost every software that has been listed here in the chat. And I can tell you what, um, I just reached out at the Academic Success Center, right? And they had a lot of different resources and were able to answer my questions about how to navigate software and how to utilize that. So I definitely would look there for any resources you need with that.
Thank you so much. Another question in here in the Q&A. And so Reginald just has some questions because looks like he has about 20 years of professional experience that spans multiple business sectors. And again, looking into phenomenological methodology just to see if that's a good fit. He's currently in the very early stages of the journey. He's in the scholar literature review in the business program, so a little bit different from your background. I guess he's just wanting your thoughts on what's best. I'm going to use this quote: what's best to reduce the pain of the research process. Any tips or tricks that you can share aside from, utilizing your resources at the university?
Now, I've the beginning of my journey, I had similar questions, right? So, what is the key methodology to get through this journey as painless as possible? And what I can honestly say is whatever one you will commit to. That is the truth. So what I can say is you already know, okay, we have the resources, the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Academic Success Center. So everyone here that you reach out to will have a doctoral degree and specialize in any subject that you are, reaching out for. However, what I can say is that if you're working closely with your chair and your chair gives you the go, or it looks like a great fit for quantitative or qualitative or a certain software, they will support you. And that is the nice part about having that one professor to one student on your doctoral journey. So I would say whatever one you will stick to, whatever one you will commit to going to the webinars, or you will find success in that method.
I have heard that too, Dr. Ayers, because you live and breathe that document, and this is something that Dr. Ayers and I were talking about before the webinar even started, just the dissertation journey. And right, so picking that one question to do your research on, and then when you're done with your dissertation, you can still go do more research in other fields respectively. But I think sometimes when we're in it and we're like, this is what we're doing, it's nice to have that, I guess, that positive support of knowing, like, I'm interested in this question, like, as you mentioned, invested, right? Couple more things. Someone said, thank you so much. Someone wants to know if your dissertation is accessible in the library.
It is.
Oh, it is. Okay,
It is.
great. Searching Dr. Nina Ayers. Awesome. Okay. And then this is a great question. How can a researcher clarify questions that the participant may present during the interview?
Just ask them.
Okay.
So, I had to practice that. I actually practiced this with my chair. So and it has been my experience that your chair, your committee wants to see you finish. They want to, put your hood on you. They want to see you at graduation. So they want you to cross that finish line. And what I can tell you is that it has been my experience, my chair let me practice because I had that same question. Now, my topic, I did research with informal caregivers, so family caregivers. And I was really nervous to ask clarifying questions. And there's a lot that I don't know, right? And so I would be talking to people and they would tell me about, their day, or they would use terms that I was unfamiliar with. And I would ask them, what is it that you mean by that? And then after that, I would thank them for helping me understand it and clarifying that for me. Because without asking, how do I know? And if I just let the conversation move on without clarifying, it doesn't matter if it's 2 to 10 clarifying questions. People will help you. Your participants want to be part of your study, and they will help you understand and spend time making sure that you understand what they're trying to portray. So spend your time there, making sure you understand before you move on, and your participant will appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Let me see. Someone asked, how do we access the YouTube channel? I just popped that in the chat for you. Let's see. Okay, someone has a question about the I guess, how old references are when you use them. Oftentimes we hear the feedback not to use references in scholarly papers. What is it? More than 3 to 5 years or something
Correct.
along those lines. But I think it's okay for a presentation. Am I
That's correct. So,
okay?
but I understand what is being asked. So, I wanted to give you the information where it came from, not someone else's interpretation of, Sanders or someone else's interpretation of Colaizzi. So, to pull that forth, you can work with the Academic Success Center, the librarian, and they will show you how to find the most recent publications from Colaizzi, or
Oh,
they
that's
would
awesome.
also show you how to see who has also utilized them. Who has also cite or used them as a reference within the last 3 years. And that's how you can pull that forward.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Ayers, for that clarification. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Let me see right now. Um, there's one other person, and I think this is a great way to close. So if there's any other questions, feel free to let us know. One in the Q&A. So Donna, I see your question in the Q&A. I've always wanted to do qualitative phenomenological study. However, my focus is on parenting of Black American boys ages 11 to 20. How much literature do you think I will find is the question. I wouldn't be able to answer that. Honestly, not an expert in the field, but Dr. Ayers, do you have any insight or any thoughts on that last question in the Q&A?
That sounds like it's going to be an amazing dissertation, right? So, um, it's really hard to put a number on it. And I
Right.
can say I've been in this position before as well, where I wanted to know how many pages would I have on caregivers and would it be enough? But the only way to really know is to really dive into it, because you would be surprised. And I can tell you, I've worked with the library so much. Please make sure you contact the librarian. It's a free resource and I always recommend them. So let's say for me, I was looking at, caregivers. And then, okay, a subtopic that came up was hospital caregivers, family caregivers, paid caregivers, unpaid caregivers. So it really branched out. And what you're looking is your literature review is an exhaustive, robust review of everything. So if someone that knew nothing about your topic picks up this piece of your dissertation, they could learn everything they could about it. And so, in saying that, when you work with the library and they help you expand on the different angles to look at your research, I would say there's going to be a lot of research and topics that you can expand on.
Oh my goodness, Dr. Ayers, thank you so much. And even when you just rattled off that list of all the different kind of caregivers, like I'm thinking caregivers in my head, and I never even went to each one of those little places, but you rattled them off like, oh my goodness. Um, so many people just said thank you so much in the chat. Thank you for answering any of the questions, even if they were difficult ones from time to time. And we just appreciate you. I think with that, without any other things that have popped in, nope, just several people just saying thank you so much. So Dr. Ayers, we appreciate you and thanks for taking the time to spend with us today and go over phenomenological methodology.
Thank you for having me, and
Eh,
good luck and best of luck to everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.